The lawyer's office went dead silent the moment my brother smiled. Marcus actually smiled, sliding a folder across the table like he was closing a business deal instead of robbing our dying father blind. "The will is clear," he said. "Everything goes to me." He didn't know our father had recorded a video 3 days before he died. He didn't know I had a key to a safe deposit box he never found. And he had no idea that in exactly 11 days, a judge was going to open an envelope that would end his life as he knew it. Our father, Walter Hendricks, built a hardware supply company from a single rented garage in 1987 into a regional distributor worth just under $9 million. He was a quiet man, the kind who fixed his own roof at 70 and never once raised his voice, even when he had every reason to. I'm Claire, his younger child, the one who actually worked alongside him for the last 12 years while my older brother Marcus chased failed ventures in 3 different cities and called twice a year, usually when he needed money. Dad got sick in the spring. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, the kind of diagnosis that doesn't leave room for negotiation. He had maybe 4 months. Marcus showed up within a week of hearing the news, suddenly attentive, suddenly present, suddenly the devoted son he'd never been. I should have seen it for what it was. I was too busy actually taking care of our father to notice my brother taking notes. Dad kept his important documents in a locked drawer in his study, the same drawer where he'd kept our childhood report cards and the photo of our mother who died when I was 9. I never touched that drawer without asking. Marcus apparently didn't share that hesitation. Looking back, I think the rewriting started almost the moment Dad lost the strength to read fine print himself. By June, Dad was confined to a hospital bed set up in the living room. I changed his medication schedule, fed him when his hands shook too badly to hold a spoon, and sat with him through nights when the pain medication wasn't enough. Marcus visited on weekends, always with his phone out, always finding reasons to be alone with Dad in the study going over paperwork. I thought it was sweet that they were finally bonding. I had no idea what kind of bonding was actually happening behind that door. Dad passed on a Tuesday morning in late July with my hand in his. His last clear words to me were, "Check the box, Claire Bear, you'll understand everything." I didn't know what box he meant. I was too consumed with grief to chase down a riddle from a dying man's lips. I buried that sentence somewhere in the back of my mind and focused on getting through the funeral. The will reading happened 9 days later in the office of Daniel Forsyth, our family's longtime attorney, a careful, silver-haired man who had handled Dad's business affairs for over 20 years. I walked in expecting an even split, or at least something close to fair. Marcus walked in like he already knew the outcome. He'd written most of it. "The most recent will," Forsyth said, adjusting his glasses, "executed 6 weeks ago, supersedes the prior version from 2019. He read through the language slowly. "The company, the house, the investment accounts, all of it, 100% to Marcus Hendricks. I was named in exactly one line, a token $5,000 for sentimental keepsakes." I sat there in complete stillness while the room seemed to tilt sideways. 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, Dad could barely sign his own name without my help steadying his wrist. 6 weeks ago, I had been the one driving him to oncology appointments while Marcus sat in the study going over paperwork. "That's not possible," I said quietly. "Dad wasn't capable of executing a new will 6 weeks ago." Marcus didn't even have the decency to avoid my eyes. "Dad knew what he was doing, Claire. He told me himself he wanted to make things right. You got the company for 12 years of free labor. I think he wanted to even the scales for me." I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. Instead, something in me went very, very calm, the kind of calm that comes right before you decide you are not going to lose this quietly. "Check the box," I said out loud, almost to myself. "What box?" Marcus asked, his composure flickering for half a second, just half a second, but I caught it. "Nothing," I said. "Congratulations on the inheritance." I drove straight to Meridian Trust and Savings, the bank Dad had used since before I was born. I asked about a safe deposit box under his name. The teller, a woman named Renata who'd known our family for 15 years, pulled up the account and slid a small brass key across the counter. "He added you as a co-signer back in March," she said. "Said it was important you have access no matter what." March, 4 months before he died. 4 months before the new will Marcus claimed Dad had wanted to write. Inside the box was a single sealed envelope addressed to Daniel Forsyth, a thumb drive labeled in Dad's careful handwriting. "Watch this before you sign anything," and a notarized document dated March 14th, 3 full months before the will Marcus had presented. It was a durable power of attorney, naming me Claire Hendricks as the sole agent for all of Walter Hendricks's medical and financial decisions in the event of incapacity. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive to the attorney's office. My hands were shaking the same way Dad's used to shake near the end. I wasn't angry yet. I was still in shock. The anger was coming, but first, I needed to understand exactly what I was holding. Daniel Forsythe's office had the same wood paneling it had had for 20 years, the same smell of old paper and coffee. He read the power of attorney document twice, his expression shifting from professional neutrality into something sharper. "Claire," he said slowly, "if this is what I think it is, the June will may be entirely invalid." A power of attorney like this, combined with documented incapacity, raises serious questions about who actually had legal authority to make decisions for your father in his final months. "There's more," I said, and slid the thumb drive across the desk. We watched it together. Dad's face, thinner than I remembered being able to bear, filled the screen. He spoke slowly, but his eyes were clear, sharper than they'd been in weeks. "If you're watching this," he said, "it means I was right to be worried." Marcus came to me in April asking me to sign new paperwork. I refused. I told him the company stays with Claire, the house stays with Claire because Claire is the one who never left. He didn't like that answer. "I want this recorded because I don't trust what happens after I'm gone. Daniel, if a new will appears that contradicts everything I'm telling you right now, I need you to fight it with everything you have. Claire, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't want your last months with me to be about lawyers and paperwork. I wanted them to be about us." Forsythe paused the recording. His jaw was tight. "This is dated 5 weeks before he died. The will Marcus filed is dated 3 weeks after this recording." He looked at me. "Claire, I think your father was manipulated, possibly coerced, while under documented incapacity, into signing a document that completely contradicts his clearly stated, sound mind intentions. This isn't a probate dispute anymore. This is potential elder fraud and forgery." I drove home that night and didn't sleep. I kept hearing Dad's voice. "Check the box, Claire Bear." He'd known. He'd known something was wrong, and he'd built a trail for me to find piece by piece in case he ran out of time to fix it himself. Forsythe filed an emergency petition to contest the will the following Monday, citing lack of capacity, undue influence, and a pre-existing durable power of attorney that should have governed all major decisions during Dad's final months. Marcus's lawyer fired back immediately, calling the claims a grieving sibling's desperate attempt to overturn a legally executed document. The court scheduled a hearing for 11 days out. Those 11 days were a war fought in documents. Forsythe subpoenaed Dad's medical records from his oncologist, Dr. Patricia Yoon, who had been treating him for the final 8 months. He subpoenaed the bank signing logs from the notary who had witnessed the June will. He subpoenaed Marcus's phone records, which, it turned out, Marcus had not anticipated anyone doing. I did something too, something I'm not entirely proud of, but I don't regret. I called Dr. Yoon myself, not as a legal maneuver, just as a daughter who needed to understand what had actually happened to her father's mind in his final weeks. She told me something that turned my stomach. "Your father's pain medication regimen by mid-June included high-dose opioids combined with a sedative for anxiety," she said gently. Cognitively, during that window, his ability to fully process complex legal language would have been significantly compromised. I documented concerns about decision-making capacity in his chart on June 9th. Whoever had him sign anything around that time should have known that. The will was signed June 12th, 3 days after his own oncologist had formally flagged concerns about his capacity in writing. Marcus, it turned out, had known exactly when Dad's medication windows left him most vulnerable. He had scheduled the notary visit for a Thursday afternoon, the same time block every week when Dad's pain medication peaked and his lucidity dipped. The notary, a young man named Trevor Buck, had simply checked a box on a standard form attesting Dad appeared alert and capable. He hadn't asked a single follow-up question. He hadn't known about the oncologist's notes because nobody had told him to look. The hearing took place in a modest courtroom that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner, nothing like the marble grandeur people imagine when they think of inheritance battles. Judge Eleanor Whitfield presided, a woman in her 60s known locally for an almost surgical patience and zero tolerance for theatrics. Marcus sat beside his attorney looking irritated more than nervous, the look of a man who still believed this was a formality he'd win through sheer paperwork. Forsythe opened by playing the recording. The courtroom went still as Dad's thinned, determined voice filled the room. Marcus's jaw tightened with every sentence. When the recording ended, Judge Whitfield removed her glasses and looked directly at Marcus for the first time. "Mr. Hendricks, would you like to explain to me why a man who explicitly stated on video, 5 weeks before his death, that the company and house were to remain with your sister. Somehow signed a document 3 weeks later reversing that entirely. My father changed his mind, Marcus said. People are allowed to change their minds. People with documented capacity are, Judge Whitfield said evenly. Dr. Yoon's notes from June 9th raised significant questions about whether your father had that capacity on June 12th. Marcus's attorney tried to object, tried to argue the notary's attestation should stand as sufficient evidence of competence. Judge Whitfield was unmoved. A notary checking a box is not a substitute for documented medical capacity, counsel. I have a treating physician's contemporaneous clinical notes that directly contradict that box. Then came the second twist, the one none of us, not even Forsyth, had seen coming. Renata, the bank teller, had been subpoenaed to testify about the power of attorney filing in March. Under questioning, she mentioned something almost in passing. Mr. Hendricks came into the branch in early June, she said, looking at Marcus, asking whether the power of attorney on file could be revoked or removed without the account holder's signature. I told him it could not, that only Walter could revoke it himself. The courtroom went quiet in a different way now. This wasn't just a will written under questionable capacity. This was a man who had known about my legal authority and had actively tried to find a way around it before going forward with the new will anyway. Forsyth didn't even need to ask the next question, but he did anyway, for the record. Mr. Hendricks, why were you trying to remove your sister's power of attorney 3 days before a notary signed a will giving you everything? Marcus had no answer that didn't sound exactly like what it was. Judge Whitfield took a recess to review the full record before returning with her ruling. When she came back, she didn't waste time. This court finds the will dated June 12th invalid due to lack of testamentary capacity and clear evidence of undue influence exercised by the respondent, Marcus Hendricks, during a documented period of medical vulnerability. The 2019 will, executed while Walter Hendricks was unquestionably of sound mind, is hereby reinstated as the controlling testamentary document. She paused, looking over her glasses at Marcus. I am additionally referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review of potential elder fraud and forgery charges. Attempting to circumvent a documented power of attorney while a parent is medically incapacitated is not a gray area, Mr. Hendricks. It is a crime. Marcus's face had gone the color of old paper. His attorney was already gathering files, already calculating how fast he could distance himself from a client about to become a defendant in a criminal matter, not just a civil one. The 2019 will, the real one, the one Dad had written while healthy and clear-eyed, split the estate the way he'd always told me he intended before any of this began. 60% to me, in recognition of the years I'd spent running the company alongside him. 40% to Marcus, because Dad never stopped loving him, even knowing exactly who he was. Dad's generosity outlived his own ability to defend it. It took a recording, a thumb drive, and a forgotten brass key to bring it back to life. 3 weeks after the ruling, the district attorney filed formal charges against Marcus for forgery and financial exploitation of an elder adult. He's currently awaiting trial, and from what Forsyth tells me, the bank records, the medical notes, and Renata's testimony leave very little room for any outcome other than conviction. I still have the thumb drive. I've watched it more times than I probably should, not for the legal vindication, but for the sound of Dad's voice telling me he was sorry, telling me he saw me, telling me that even at the end, even sick and afraid, he was still trying to protect me one last time. He didn't leave me a fortune so much as he left me proof that the version of him my brother tried to rewrite was never the real one. The company is still running. I kept the name on the building exactly the way Dad had it, Hendricks Supply, no asterisks, no addendums. Some afternoons I still expect to hear his footsteps in the warehouse, still expect him to ask if I remembered to lock the safe. I lock it now. I check it every single day. Some lessons you only have to learn once. Marcus hasn't called. I don't expect him to. What we had wasn't a relationship he was ever willing to actually show up for, not even at the very end, not even when our father was dying 10 feet away from him. He showed up for the inheritance. He never once showed up for the man. I think about Dad's last clear sentence to me almost every day. Check the box, Claire Bear, you'll understand everything. He was right. I understand everything now, not just about the will, but about who he was underneath all that quiet patience. A man who, even with weeks left to live, was still thinking 3 steps ahead to protect the daughter who never left his side. That's the inheritance that actually mattered. The money just came with it.